I'm very conscious that this debate is most likely being watched by victims and survivors in Northern Ireland, as well as those based here on the mainland. And I'm conscious of how painful this is for them. The hurt being inflicted, the trauma, indeed the sense of betrayal brought about by this bill. Mr Deputy Speaker, I make no apology in stating that it is those innocent victims of terrorism who are front and centre in how I and my party approach dealing with the past. The past is still their present. They paid the greatest price. They didn't choose to pay that price. It was inflicted upon them by the bomb and the bullet, by the evil, wicked hand of terrorism. For the price paid, all they seek in return is justice, for the perpetrator to be held to account for their deathly actions. Whilst the widow and her young family stood at the graveside mourning the loss of the innocent husband and father, they crave that moment where the terrorist stands in the dock facing justice. As time has passed, that ray of hope has grown dimmer, but remained. Today, the government are extinguishing that hope. Mr Deputy Speaker, as a party, we have consistently applied a number of tests to any proposal around legacy. The tests are as follows. There remains the opportunity for justice for victims, no amnesty, and that any process is fair and balanced. What we have before us today in the form of this bill fails all three tests. As far back as the Belfast Agreement, the DUP opposed the reduction in tariff for terrorist-related offences to a maximum of 2 years. We found such leniency towards those guilty of some of the most heinous crimes imaginable to be a perversion of justice. Yet what this bill proposes is even worse, for there is no custodial sentence whatsoever in these proposals, only a period on licence. To the on-the-run letters of comfort, add the freedom pass. How utterly repugnant. Mr Deputy Speaker, we know how this process will work. In reality, a terrorist could come forward, tell whatever tale he or she contrives with no new evidence. On the balance of probabilities, some will get the reward of an amnesty for their tall tale. I am yet to decide if this is naivety or simply duplicitous of the government to suggest this bill will help address the legacy of the past. To do that, surely truth means something. For Sinn Féin, truth means concealing as much as it can about IRA terrorism. When he appeared before the Savile inquiry, Martin McGuinness, IRA godfather with the blood of many innocent dripping from his hands, stated that his IRA oath curtailed what he could say. He said the following, and the government ought to take note of this statement: I feel I cannot answer that question because there is a Republican code of honour. For me to identify who these people are would be a betrayal in my view. To do so would have been a gross act of betrayal. I have a duty, in my view, stretching back 30 years to those people, and I am not prepared to break my word to them under any circumstances. Despicable. Mr Deputy Speaker, in the time I have left, let me raise one other issue, and that is in relation to our brave armed forces who stood against those intent on death and destruction. Mr Deputy Speaker, we have seen the imbalance in resources and the ferocity at which answers have been sought in instances involving our armed forces vis-à-vis terrorism. It is not that long ago that I stood outside Belfast Courthouse with the late Dennis Hutchings and the honourable member from Plymouth and Merview, chased to his grave by those intent on the vexatious prosecution of soldiers. Dennis, like others, was placed in that position in rural Ulster, not through choice, but in response to a situation foisted upon our land. This country and this House put our young men and women in an incredibly dangerous position, and as part of their operational duties, they had to make very difficult operational decisions, sometimes with tragic outcomes. Mr Deputy Speaker, it is appalling that they should then be subject to the full rigour of criminal investigation as proposed by this bill. And furthermore, it is scandalous that should a soldier tell his story and it is not completely corroborated by documentary evidence, that the burden of proof for the soldier is much higher than that of the terrorist for whom they were sent to defeat. Mr Deputy Speaker, it was William Gladstone who famously said, "Justice delayed is justice denied." However, this bill, in our opinion, is much worse, for this bill is justice denied and justice destroyed. Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker.